In the traditional martial art of kendo, exponents fight with bamboo swords over a meter long. The action can be lightning fast, with strikes landed in as little as a tenth of a second. In a bout of kendo, the first competitor to take 2 points is the winner. Points can only be scored with strikes to one of 4 designated target areas. These are to the men, or head, to the do, or torso, to the kote, or wrist, or a thrust to the throat, known as tsuki. Simply landing a blow is not enough for a point to count, however. Each strike must be executed with elegant posture and sufficient strength, and also use the correct part of the sword. In addition, the attacker must remain alert and composed after landing their blow. Only then is the point awarded. The majority of points are scored with one of the 3 striking blows, rather than the throat thrust. More than 2.5 million people are believed to practice kendo worldwide. It's popular among men and women of all ages across many different nations. One Japanese swordsman fundamental to any discussion of fighting with 2 swords is Miyamoto Musashi, who lived 400 years ago. Musashi, a frequent hero of comic books and novels, is said to have fought and won more than 60 battles. Experts say his greatest contribution to swordsmanship was to overturn the preconception that a fighter should only use one sword.
Musashi's approach was very rational. He thought that as warriors carried 2 swords, why should they only use one at a time? He came up with the idea of simply holding a sword in each hand. From a modern perspective, it's about making full use of your abilities and of your surrounding environment and the resources it has to offer.
The 2-sword technique established by Musashi is today one of the officially accepted fighting styles under the rules of kendo. Using 2 swords requires great technical skill, however, so practitioners of the technique are rare.
In addition, there's some prejudice against the 2-sword approach. People think of single-sword kendo as true kendo. They don't really approve of using 2 swords. Also, as you strike with just one hand, you need a really clear, forceful contact for the judges to award a point. So these days, I think it's difficult for someone using 2 swords to win.
With a 2-sword approach, it can be hard to score, as one-handed strikes are often judged to be too weak. One notable kendoka has been reversing this trend, however. This is Nobuyuki Yamana. In 2007, he entered the All-Japan Kendo Championships, making waves as the first exponent of Nito-ryu to take part in 38 years. Yamana wins by striking the wrist guard. His powerful attacks change the image of 2-sword fighting. Having retired from competition, Yamana now teaches children. After his kids' classes, he still practices Nito-ryu. Although he says that he's lost 2/3 of his peak speed, he can still strike hard. Yamana spoke to us about the advantages of fighting with two swords.
Nitoryu allows you to attack and defend simultaneously. You can push back on your opponent's sword with one sword and strike with the other. Or you can block an attack to your mask while launching your own attack at the same time.
With standard kendo, fighting with one sword, it's not possible to attack and defend at the same time. When you attack, you often need to push away your opponent's sword first. Blocking an opponent's attack before launching your own leads to a two-stage process. The special advantage of Nitoryu is being able to block with your short sword while simultaneously attacking with your long sword. The key issue, though, is generating enough force for the attack.
If you try to swing your sword with brute strength, it won't work. You need to harness the principle of leverage. That's why I hold the sword here. So as a lever, this is the fulcrum, the point of force, and the point of action. When you get ready to strike, if you hold the sword too tightly, you won't be able to swing it. So you hold the sword lightly with half strength and only grip tightly at the instant you move in to strike. It's gripping firmly that moves the blade.
Forcing your opponent to focus on the short sword is also a good way of luring them into a trap.
There is actually some magic in the way it affects the distance with your opponent. It's completely different when you have the short sword. It makes it much easier to control the combat distance.
In standard kendo, opponents manage the distance between them by touching their sword tips together. If his opponent gets in too close, he immediately attacks them with his long sword. With their own sword blocked by Yamana's short sword, they can't easily counter.
The trick lies in adjusting the distance. If they concentrate on the short sword, then you bring the long sword down to attack. And if they're focused on looking upwards at the long sword, you can hold them with the short sword. They won't know where to look or how to attack. It confuses them. And an opponent who tries to attack while confused, if you use a feint like we did earlier, if they attack first, then they will lose.
A tremendous amount of practice is required to handle both swords at once. Yamana says that over the 20 years he's been using two swords, he's come to understand more deeply the importance of the short sword.
As it's easy to wield the short sword quickly, many people believe it's solely for defense and difficult to use for attack. But what I realized when I was in the Japan Championships and other major tournaments is that it's also for attack, and that if you don't use the short sword properly, you're left simply with the long sword held in one hand, which means losing half your power. For someone using two swords, the short sword is your lifeline.